Hi. I want to talk about another topic which is really near and dear to my heart, and that is corporal punishment. Well, it's not really near and dear to my heart, but it's certainly a topic that I've been interested in my whole life. My father was a psychiatrist, and he was a very smart guy, provided me with a very uh, luxurious life as a child. Still sitting in what was his house. He died in 2004. And, I went to private school, went yachting, had a lot of advantages that a lot of people don't get. Um, However, and I feel it may seem that ungrateful because I have some issues with him, and none uh, bigger than corporal punishment. My father believed in corporal punishment, which is ironic that as a psychiatrist who is, you know, at the top of the food chain, maybe neurologists are, of the mental health profession because they're scientists, he believed in corporal punishment. He thought, in particular, that for boys, it would make them tougher. Um, and for me and my brother, uh, that was his mentality. And so, let me give some examples. All right. So I remember when we were really young, my father was also in the United States Air Force. He never actually was deployed, I don't think, because he was in the he was in I think Wisconsin or California right as Truman was dropping atom bombs on Japan. So he ended up not going anywhere. But I remember as a small child, my father would make us do military corners on the bed. And if we got them wrong, then we would have to do them again and again and again. Then I remember um, if my and my brother in particular, I think my brother got the worst of it. If he would say the word like, he liked to say like, like, and that really aggravated my dad. So he would make him say something again and again and again. And so that's not corporal punishment, but that's punishment. Um, then there was the actual corporal punishment. And here's some examples. Like, I remember my father, I still have the organ that my father had. And I remember he was supposedly teaching me how to play the organ. And every time I would hit a wrong note, he'd slap my hand. So, needless to say, I became very disinterested in playing the organ. And, pow, slap, pow. And he used to go to the St. Thomas Episcopal Church, which I thought was funny. Is right here in West Philadelphia. It's this historically African American church founded by Absalom Jones and Richard Allen. Anyway, I guess I was too fidgety when we'd go to church, so I'd be squirming around. So he'd slap my leg when I was in the pew. Then there was, you might say, oh well, so what? I know there are children who are really abused because I work as a clinical social worker, and unfortunately, corporal punishment is a daily occurrence. But it gets worse. So then there was the chair incident in the dining room. I forgot what I was doing, but I broke a chair. And I knew I was going to get it as soon as my father came home. In fact, my mother never hit me. Never as a child. I think she slapped me once as an adult. As a child, she never hit me, which I really appreciated. But she would report me to my dad, and then he'd hit me. So I broke a chair, and my mom said, "Well," I was like, "Well, I'm going to get," and I think there was nothing worse than the anticipation that I'm going to get spanked. But so I broke this chair, and my mom said, "Well, just be honest about it. Just tell your father what you did, and he'll understand." So when he came home, I said, "Oh, I broke the chair." Whap! Right in the back of my head. Right. So I started crying, and my mother said, "Oh, I told him that if he told you the truth, then he wouldn't be hit or he wouldn't be in trouble." So my father said, "Oh. Well, no, you still shouldn't have broken the chair." So then there was that. And then I just remember a number of times my next door neighbor, Tina, I would be really scared. I used to, when I was really young, I would put books in the back of my pants and hide in the bushes because I knew I was going to get spanked when I got home. And she would try to console me. Then there was a time I was coming home on the bus with a friend of mine, Joel, and we were late. We went downtown. And my father was standing right there at the bus stop. I think I was 13, 14 years old. And, I understand he's worried about what happened to me, I'm sure. But he just popped me right the moment I got off the bus. And it was humiliating. It's humiliating. It's degrading. And then sometimes he would call us oxen. Said sometimes he would just have us just stand there and wait for him to give a command for whatever he wanted us to do. And he calls, particularly my brother, the N word or an idiot. It's very degrading language. I think he said, "You're not going to amount to much when you get older." And then I remember I was, what's another one? Oh, my brother and I were supposed to be raking leaves outside. And so we left the rakes in the middle of the street, and we were running to go and play baseball with these guys at the end of the block. My dad came over to the game with a switch, and my brother, I had enough sense to run around the far side of the house so I could avoid getting hit. My brother ran right into my father and got whacked. I could hear him. And then there was many instances where my father had a yacht. We would go boating in the northeast section of Maryland on the Chesapeake Bay. He had a nice 32-foot. He had a couple 32-foot boats. One was a Pacemaker. I think the other one was a Carver, something like that. And I would notice, one of the reasons probably I don't drink today is that my dad would hit us. It seemed like to me, at least, we get hit more if my father was intoxicated. My father, like I said, provided us with a great life. Went to elite private school and yachting and Jack and Jill, if you've never heard of that. And all this nice stuff. Not a whole lot of traveling, but a little bit of travel. Actually, he did let me go on a trip to France and Canada as a teenager, but I can't emphasize how much damage I think hitting your children does. And certainly verbal abuse is painful. But for me, there's nothing good about corporal punishment. When I was a student at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, I wrote a paper on corporal punishment, and I looked at the work of Murray Strauss, Elizabeth Gershoff, and Hyman, this guy who was at Temple University, Irwin Hyman. And a funny thing about Irwin Hyman, I remember I had his book. I think it's something like Alternatives to Spanking. And because I worked as a teacher, and I also worked as a what they call a behavior specialist and mobile therapist in the Philadelphia and surrounding areas, and I've been a licensed clinical social worker in New Jersey uh, for now about 6 years, and a weekly occurrence. So I remember I was talking to this mother, and I presented her with Irwin Hyman's book, and she said, "Oh, this would be very helpful." She proceeded to smack a kid in the head with her son with the book. I said, "Oh, that wasn't the reason I gave it to you. Not so you could use it to pop your son in the head." I've seen every kind of abuse um, imaginable, from minor to torture, uh, in my work. One of the worst cases I ever saw was, and it's interesting, the military and veterans, for example. Like, I remember this kid, his dad had been in Iraq, I believe, or maybe it was Afghanistan. This was, let's say, 2010, maybe. And I remember this kid did not talk, and he gained an enormous amount of weight. His father had apparently thrown him down a flight of stairs, broke his leg in multiple places, and then tried to act as if it was a a fall, an accident at the jungle gym. Doctors realized that wasn't true. Um, Kid finally one day just started screaming in school, and they sent him to a military, or not a military. They sent him to a behavioral school. He screamed out, "The white people killed Pocahontas." Anyway, I've got millions of stories like that. Torture. I mean, I even have friends who I watch their mom and their dad hit them, or just really vile stuff. And I think decades later, they're still impacted by the corporal punishment. I think you can overcome it, certainly, but I think it does a lot of damage. And I remember when I was a student at PCOM, I read the work of Elizabeth Gershoff. She writes a lot about corporal punishment. And one of the articles I read is she did like this meta analysis. She looked at, like, it was like 50 years or something like that of all these studies. And she found that there were a lot of negative effects to hitting children. First of all, if you just think about it, like, I notice, on Facebook or social media, people say, "You know what hitting taught me? Respect. I learned how to respect my adults, authorities." Well, that's not true, is it? Can you think of it? There's no other situation where you are allowed to hit other people. You just can't. You cannot go out and hit adults. You can't hit your wife. You can't hit your spouse. But you can hit children. And people think that children benefit from it somehow. And it's interesting because, it's one thing to me if you say, "Oh, I hit a child because I was frustrated and I lost control." It's not right, but okay. Sometimes children can be annoying. I'm sure sometimes I was annoying, you know. But at the same time, to tell me that you're hitting a child for their benefit, no, it doesn't benefit. How could it benefit the child? You're teaching violence. And Gershoff shows, as does Murray Strauss, uh, how many different ways corporal punishment has a deleterious impact on a child's well-being, what they think of themselves. Now, it is possible that the child could realize at a young age that their parent hitting them is their problem, and they might not internalize the hitting. But even in that case, I think children generally want to please their parents. They want to be loved by their parents. They want a good relationship with their parents. When you introduce hitting, at best, it's confusing because here's this person who you want to please you and they're hitting you. For me, you know, it led to some insecurity, self-doubt, uh, anxiety, uh, and also my own anger. Um, I went through a lot of therapy to talk about, being hit and my anger about it. Now it's interesting because my older brother, he started to, and actually I think he got the worst of it. He doesn't believe that it was a problem like I do, but he got the worst of it. And one of the things that he would start doing is he would start fighting back. That's another problem with corporal punishment. What do you do when your children start hitting you back and they start getting bigger and it doesn't work anymore? Now, what are you going to do? That's a problem. And that's going to happen about 15. So I've actually seen my dad and my brother fighting. I've tried to break them up. And I think to this day, I think it has an absolute impact on my brother. And a lot of my friends I grew up with who I know, like a lot of people probably don't know what's wrong with them. I think it exacerbates mental illness. I think it leads to substance abuse. I think it leads to self doubt, anxiety, um, any number of problems, some lower sense of self worth. Again, you can overcome it. I've had to make a lot of as I'm a mandated reporter, so I've had to. I don't like making phone calls. I would personally, I would just like for the parents to stop. I don't really want to punish the parents. I think in a lot of cases, the parents themselves were physically abused, and maybe sometimes that's all that they know. But I just would like for them to stop. I remember one kid, he wanted to talk to his great aunt. I was sitting right there, and he just wanted to tell her about a football game because she liked sports, and he just opened up her door without knocking. So she takes a belt and she starts beating him with the belt. And I had to call that in. I told them, they said, please don't call that in. Please don't call that in. And I remember I felt like at the time the DHS worker sounded like she was drunk, to be quite frank, because she kept asking me to repeat myself. And she was not focused on, why, the fact that the great aunt hit this kid. She wanted to know why I didn't stop it, why I guess I didn't jump in. Well, and I said, well, first of all, I had no idea she was going to do that. And I was like, no position. I can't physically intervene sometimes. And I don't even know that I'm supposed to. I was taken off guard. I mean, maybe I should have stopped it, but to me, it wasn't the point. I'm not the call. I wasn't the one uh, physically damaging this child who's already been through so much anyway. And yet, and to me, it's just common sense that you shouldn't hit children at all. Of course, I don't have any children. That's another thing people say, well, what would I know? I never had children. But anyway, uh, corporal punishment does damage. I think now most of the major organizations who deal with children, who work with children, American Psychological Association, the American Pediatric Association, so on and so forth, they all recognize that hitting kids doesn't work. It's not effective. And in fact, does damage. It does damage. And how could it not do damage? And I think it makes the world a more violent and dangerous place. Um, and I think it's probably increased psychiatric problems and just all around. Like, and another thing is, like, as a therapist, I'm supposedly supposed to be teaching kids impulse control, delayed gratification, anger management, frustration tolerance, emotional regulation, interpersonal skills. But if you're hitting them, if their parents are hitting them, their number one role models, then that negates whatever it is I'm trying to do, right? Because you're teaching brute force. You're you're the person, you control the food, the clothing, the internet access, the video games, every aspect of this child's life, the house, the shelter. And you mean to tell me you don't have any other recourse than to hit the child? I've stood in many uh, playgrounds, and I've noticed that kids sort of reenact. I've seen this like scores of times. Kids will reenact a parent hitting a child, and it's like it's a script, you know. So I'm hoping. I think Benjamin Spock came out very much against corporal punishment, and he had it would sound like a very abusive mother himself. So I think that would make a huge. I think a lot of problems stem from corporal punishment. Yes, children could overcome it. They used to have corporal punishment in school. I don't know if they. I don't. I think they still do in the South in some places. Luckily, it's been outlawed, as far as I know, at least here in Pennsylvania in 1974. But I know, like, in Catholic school, the the nuns, I've heard. I never went to Catholic school, but they would wrap your knuckles, right? And I've heard people talk about washing mouths out with soap. It doesn't work. It doesn't. First of all, it doesn't work. You might scare children in the short run. Certainly don't teach respect. That's absurd. And you're not teaching children problem solving skills that they can use in society, because your child cannot go out and hit people if they don't pay attention or do what they want them to do. That's not how anything works. You'll get arrested for assault. They'll get arrested for assault. And then, you know, the parents will then wonder, well, what happened to my child? I don't understand. So don't hit your children. It doesn't mean you, on the other hand, I've seen children hitting adults. I'm not for that either. I'm not for children doing whatever they want either. But and I know people don't want to hear about timeout. New Jersey does have a training they put us all through, the therapist. I mean, the nurtured heart training, try to emphasize the positive. I think there do have to be consequences, just not physical consequences. Like I said, you control every aspect of this child's life. There must be something that you can do other than put your hands on children, And I hate to call it in, but I'll have to call it in because I'm a mandated reporter, and I could actually get in trouble if I don't. But this is a topic that I really like to write about. It's not really. I don't see too many psychologists looking into this topic. Like I said, Elizabeth Gershoff. I think she's like I don't know if she's a psychologist per se. She has like a PhD in human development or something. But yeah, so I mean, that's basically the gist of what I have to say. I'm definitely going to revisit this topic, but violence begets more violence. And the saying, "I'll give you something to cry about," that always struck me, even as a child. Like, why would you want to give me something to cry about? I mean, life's hard enough. Why do I need more to cry about? Why can't you reason with me? Why can't you just talk to me? And you know, help me build my sense of self worth and self esteem, not lower it. And of course, there's other kinds of abuse, name calling, putting children down. But and so it's not all corporal punishment. Corporal punishment's bad enough. Let's start with that. Let's start with the with ending the notion that inflicting bodily pain on somebody is going to somehow teach them some kind of valuable lesson, because it doesn't. And I would think everybody sort of knows that on some level, right? Or we should. But I'm glad at least the organizations uh, which are, working with children are beginning to uh, recognize it and speak up against it. And I'm going to talk more about this one. Thank you.